The grand lecture hall of Galactic University fell silent as Professor Kim stepped onto the hovering platform. His blue skin shimmered under the soft light as he adjusted his metallic spectacles with one of his 4 slender fingers. The curved amphitheater was packed with students from across the galaxy, some floating in special anti-gravity chambers, others perched on customized seats designed for their unique anatomies. "Welcome to Xenobiology 101, Professor Kim announced, his voice amplified throughout the massive space. "Today we begin our most crucial lesson of the semester." In the back row, the small group of human exchange students shifted in their seats. They were the newest species to join the Galactic Federation, and this was only the second semester that Earth had been permitted to send students to the prestigious university. Han, a biology major from Seoul, leaned forward with interest. Next, to him, Min flipped open her notebook while Sue unwrapped a small chocolate bar she'd smuggled from her dorm room. Sung, always the most relaxed of the group, stretched his long legs into the aisle. "Pay attention," Min whispered to Sung. "This is supposed to be the most important lecture of the course." Professor Kim waved his hand, and a massive holographic display materialized above his head, rotating slowly to ensure all students could see it clearly. "Today we discuss universal toxic substances," he announced gravely. "These compounds are considered deadly across nearly all known sentient species." With another gesture, the hologram transformed into a list of chemical formulas and molecular structures, each labeled in the standard galactic script. The alien students immediately began taking notes, some using electronic devices, others writing with appendages adapted for their specific physiologies. "The substances on this list represent an extraordinary danger," Professor Kim continued. "Even minimal exposure can cause severe neural disruption, organ failure, and death in most galactic citizens." Han squinted at the rotating display, his expression changing from curiosity to confusion. He nudged Min and pointed at the screen. "Is that ethanol?" he whispered. Min followed his gaze, her eyes widening. "And that one looks like caffeine. And theobromine. That's what's in chocolate." Sue froze mid-bite, looking down at the chocolate bar in her hand. Professor Kim continued his lecture, unaware of the humans' growing concern. "Let's begin with ethanol, a particularly insidious neurotoxin. Even minute quantities disrupt neural pathways, causing immediate cognitive impairment. Larger doses result in respiratory failure and death." The professor's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he manipulated the hologram to zoom in on the ethanol molecule. "Most intelligent species evolved an immediate aversion to this compound. Your body's warning systems should trigger extreme distress if you encounter it." Sung leaned over to his friends. "Isn't that just alcohol?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. Han nodded slowly, his face pale. "And next," Professor Kim continued, "we have capsaicin, a chemical weapon developed by certain plant species. It directly attacks pain receptors, causing intense agony on contact. Evolution has ensured that most intelligent beings avoid any plants containing this compound." Min's hand shot to her mouth to stifle a laugh. She'd brought a bottle of hot sauce from Earth in her luggage and had been using it with every meal. "Continuing our list, we find caffeine and theobromine," the professor said, rotating the display to highlight complex molecular structures. "These related compounds disrupt neurological function and can cause fatal cardiac arrhythmias. They're particularly dangerous because they can be mistaken for harmless nutrients until it's too late." Sue discreetly slipped her half-eaten chocolate bar back into her pocket, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Even small amounts of these substances can be lethal," Professor Kim emphasized, his voice grave. "Your survival instincts should trigger immediate revulsion upon detecting them." A tall, gangly alien student with translucent skin raised what appeared to be a tentacle. "Professor, how quickly would death occur after exposure to these toxins?" "An excellent question, Tay." "Professor," Kim nodded approvingly. "Most species would experience severe symptoms within moments of exposure. Full neural collapse typically follows within minutes, depending on the dosage and the specific physiology of the exposed individual." Han glanced at his fellow humans, his expression a mixture of amusement and concern. They'd been at the university for nearly 3 months, consuming coffee every morning, sharing chocolate care packages from home, and even brewing homemade rice wine in their dorm room's synthesizer. "Should we say something?" Min whispered. Sung shook his head slightly. "Let's wait until after class." Professor Kim continued his lecture, detailing various acids and alkaloids that rounded out the list of universal toxins. The alien students took diligent notes, occasionally gasping or making distressed sounds when particularly dangerous compounds were discussed. "Your semester project," Professor Kim announced toward the end of the lecture, "will involve researching protective measures against accidental exposure to these substances. While they are strictly controlled throughout the Federation, accidents can happen, particularly on newly discovered worlds or in unregulated spaces." A small insect-like student near the front raised a limb. "Professor, has any species ever developed resistance to these universal toxins?" Professor Kim's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of amusement. "A fascinating theoretical question, June. While minor variations in tolerance exist across species, no known sentient life form has evolved comprehensive resistance to these compounds. Natural selection strongly favors avoidance rather than tolerance of such potent toxins." The human students exchanged glances, trying to contain their reactions. Sung had to bite his lip to keep from laughing out loud. "Remember," Professor Kim concluded, his voice solemn, "respecting these biological constants is essential for survival in our diverse galactic community. What's toxic to one species is toxic to all. It's one of the few universal principles we've discovered." As the lecture ended and students began to file out, the 4 humans remained in their seats, waiting for the crowd to thin. "So," Han said, finally, "should we tell him that humans regularly consume at least half the substances on that universally deadly list?" Min considered this, tapping her pencil against her notebook. "Maybe we should check our translators first? There must be some mistake." Sue pulled the chocolate bar back out of her pocket and looked at it doubtfully. "I don't think there's a mistake. I'm pretty sure I just ate a lethal dose of theobromine and I feel fine." Sung chuckled. "Wait until he finds out about our spicy food competitions, or happy hour." As they gathered their belongings and headed for the exit, Professor Kim noticed them lingering. "Ah, our Earth students. I hope you found today's lecture informative. These universal biological principles are essential knowledge for all galactic citizens." Han nodded politely. "Very informative, Professor. We had no idea these substances were considered so dangerous." "Oh yes," Professor Kim said earnestly, his blue skin crinkling around his eyes as he smiled. "Stay vigilant. Even a small exposure to any of these compounds could be fatal. The universe is full of dangers, but knowledge is our best defense." "We'll certainly keep that in mind," Min promised, struggling to keep a straight face as they left the lecture hall. Outside, in the corridor with its soaring crystal ceiling and view of the 3 moons, the humans finally broke into laughter. "Should we tell him tomorrow?" Sue asked, taking another bite of her chocolate. "Let's wait," Sung suggested with a mischievous grin. "I think lunch tomorrow in the main cafeteria might be more interesting." The 4 humans walked away, still chuckling, completely unaware of just how dramatically their unremarkable human biology was about to upend the scientific understanding of an entire galaxy. The smell of strange foods filled the university cafeteria as students from 100 different worlds gathered for lunch. The cafeteria was a massive space with tables designed to accommodate beings of all shapes and sizes, some floating in liquid tanks, others perched on high stools with their tentacles carefully tucked underneath. June, a tall, blue-skinned alien, with 4 eyes positioned around his oval head, was carrying his tray of nutrient paste when he noticed something odd at the human table. Unlike most species who receive standardized meals from the dispensers, the humans often brought their own food. Today was no exception. "What is Han doing?" June whispered to his friend Duri, a gelatinous being who shifted shape slightly with each word. Han, one of only 7 humans at the university, was pouring a steaming dark brown liquid from a silver container. Next to him, Sue was unwrapping something that looked like small brown squares. The humans were laughing and talking as if nothing unusual was happening. "I don't know," Dury replied, his translucent body pulsing with concern. "But remember the lecture this morning? About the deadly substances?" June's upper eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of anxiety in his species. "Yes, I do. Professor Kim was very clear that some of those toxins could kill instantly." Their conversation was interrupted when Sung, another human student, arrived at the table carrying a bottle of amber liquid and a small container of bright red paste. The humans greeted each other cheerfully, completely unaware of the growing concern among the alien students nearby. Unable to contain his curiosity and worry, June approached their table. His respiratory flaps fluttered nervously as he spoke. "Excuse me, but what are those items you have there?" Han looked up with a friendly smile. "Oh, hey June, just some stuff from home. This is coffee," he said, holding up his thermos. "That's chocolate Sue's eating, and Sung brought some beer and hot sauce for later." June's four eyes widened simultaneously. Those contain substances from the deadly list Professor Kim showed us this morning." By now, other alien students were gathering around, drawn by June's alarmed tone. Yuri, a rock-like being whose silicon-based body made soft grinding sounds when she moved, rumbled in concern. The ethanol in beer, the caffeine in coffee, the capsaicin in hot sauce, and the theobromine in chocolate, all lethal toxins. The humans looked at each other, confusion on their faces, until Min, a fourth human who had been quietly eating nearby, began to laugh. "Oh, you're worried about us, don't be. These are normal foods and drinks for humans." To prove her point, Min reached over and broke off a piece of Sue's chocolate, popping it into her mouth with obvious enjoyment. The gathered aliens collectively gasped. Some backed away, while others leaned closer in morbid fascination. "But how?" asked Park, a slender alien with iridescent skin that changed colors with his emotions. Currently, a worried purple. Professor Kim was clear that these substances attack neural pathways. You should be experiencing organ failure within minutes. Sung grinned and took a swig of his beer. Our bodies process these things differently. Actually, we consume them, because we enjoy the effects they have on us. This statement caused even more alarm. Jin, a floating gas cloud being contained in a special suit, pulsed rapidly in distress. You intentionally consume neural toxins. For pleasure? The hot sauce isn't even that spicy. Sung continued, dipping a finger in the red paste and licking it off. "This is just medium heat. I have some really hot stuff back in my room." The crowd of alien students was growing larger now. Some were recording the scene with their devices, while others were frantically sending messages to professors. A few were even making what appeared to be final farewells to the humans, certain they would collapse at any moment. "Should we call medical?" whispered Bin, a multi-limbed being whose 6 arms were all ringing together in anxiety. "Already done," replied June, not taking his 4 eyes off the humans. "Professor Kim is on his way." Meanwhile, the humans continued eating and drinking their toxic substances as if nothing was wrong. Han even offered his coffee to the aliens. "Anyone want to try? It's really good." The suggestion caused several aliens to recoil in horror. One small lizard-like being actually fainted, falling backward with a soft thud. "I think that's a no," laughed Sue, breaking off another piece of chocolate. Professor Kim burst into the cafeteria, followed by 3 medical staff pushing emergency equipment. His normally composed face showed clear alarm as he rushed to the bar human table. "Stop consuming those immediately," he ordered. The humans looked up in surprise. "Why? What's wrong?" asked Han, coffee cup still raised to his lips. "Those substances on the toxic list from my lecture, you're consuming them." The professor's voice was strained with concern. Min smiled reassuringly. "It's okay, Professor. These are normal foods for humans. We've evolved to not just tolerate them, but enjoy them." Professor Kim stared in disbelief, then pulled out a medical scanner and began examining Han, who sat patiently as the device hummed over his body. The professor's expression shifted from concern to amazement. "Impossible. he muttered, checking the readings again. Your vital signs are completely normal. No signs of toxicity at all. By now, the entire cafeteria had fallen silent, all eyes on the strange humans who casually consumed poisons as if they were ordinary food. Wait until they hear about our spicy food competitions, Sung whispered to Min, who struggled to hold back laughter as the baffled professor continued his scans. The medical bay of Galactic University normally handled routine cases, the occasional allergic reaction to alien pollen, training injuries from the zero-gravity gymnasium, or homesickness manifesting as physical symptoms. Today was different. All 6 examination rooms were occupied by perfectly healthy humans, surrounded by increasingly bewildered alien medical staff. Professor Kim paced back and forth in front of the main bioscanner, his blue skin flushed to an almost purple shade, with excitement. On the screen before him were the liver readings from Han, who sat calmly on an examination table, sipping the very coffee that had caused the panic. This is remarkable, Professor Kim muttered, adjusting his spectacles. Your liver contains enzymes that break down ethanol and caffeine at rates I've never seen before. What would be lethal to most species, your body processes like, it's nothing special. Han shrugged. I've actually cut back on coffee recently. My mom drinks about 6 cups a day. Professor Kim nearly dropped his data pad. 6 times this concentration of caffeine, daily? In the next room, 3 researchers hovered around Sue, who was allowing them to scan her brain activity as she ate another piece of chocolate. The lead researcher, Dr. Yoon, a tall insectoid being with compound eyes that reflected the light in rainbow patterns, was making rapid notes. The theobromine triggers your pleasure centers, she observed with fascination. For most species, it would cause seizures and heart failure. For you, it releases endorphins? Yeah, chocolate makes us happy, Sue replied simply. Especially when we're sad or stressed. It's comfort food. Poison is comfort, Dr. Yoon clicked her mandibles in amazement. Extraordinary. The news had spread quickly beyond the medical bay. The hallway outside was crowded with curious students and faculty, all trying to peek in at the humans who had defied biological expectations. University security had to set up barriers to keep the area from becoming too congested. In the largest examination room, Sung had become the center of the most intense scrutiny. He had brought along his hot sauce collection, which now sat on a sterile tray, each bottle carefully labeled and considered as dangerous as weapons by the nervous medical staff. You're telling me you deliberately cultivate plants to produce maximum capsaicin? Asked Dr. Jin, whose gas cloud body swirled with patterns indicating deep confusion. And then you selectively breed them to be even more potent? Yeah, there. Our hot sauce competitions and everything, Sung explained. People try to make the spiciest sauce possible. My uncle grows ghost peppers back home. They're so hot you have to wear gloves just to handle them. Dr. Jin's cloudy form rippled with what might have been a shudder. And you put this on food? To make it less pleasant to eat? No, to make it more pleasant, Sung corrected. The burn is enjoyable. Across the medical bay, Professor Kim had assembled a team of the university's top xenobiologists. They huddled around screens displaying the humans' test results, pointing and debating in hushed, excited tones. Look at these neural pathways, said one researcher, a cephalopod-like being named Lee whose tentacles gesticulated at the brain scans. They've evolved to interpret these toxin interactions as pleasurable rather than dangerous. And their digestive system, added another scientist, tapping a different screen. The protective mucus layer, the specialized enzymes, it's as if they evolved on a planet filled with natural poisons and adapted to use them instead of... Professor Kim nodded thoughtfully. In a way, they did. Earth's plant life evolved various compounds to deter consumption. Instead of avoiding these plants, humans adapted to tolerate them and even seek them out. Min, who had been quietly listening to the scientists while they examined her friends, spoke up. Lots of our spices were originally used to preserve food. Before refrigeration, we needed ways to keep food from spoiling. Some toxins helped with that. The scientists turned to her with newfound interest. Professor Kim quickly brought over his datapad to record this information. So you intentionally added toxins to food for preservation? He asked. And then developed a taste for these preservatives? Pretty much, Min shrugged. Humans are adaptable. As the day progressed, more specialized equipment was brought to the medical bay. Jun, leading a team of neural specialists, had set up a complex apparatus to measure how human nerve endings responded to capsaicin. May I? Jun asked, holding a tiny drop of diluted hot sauce on a sterile probe. Han nodded and extended his arm. Jun carefully placed the drop on Han's skin. The other scientists leaned in, instruments ready to measure the reaction. It feels warm, Han reported calmly. A bit of a tingle. Jun's readings showed that the capsaicin was binding to pain receptors, but instead of triggering the expected emergency response, Han's nervous system was processing it as a mild, almost pleasant sensation. Pain without danger, Jun marveled. Your bodies recognize these substances aren't actually threatening, even though they trigger pain receptors. By evening, the initial panic had transformed into scientific wonder. The medical bay had become an impromptu research center with teams working in shifts to study different aspects of human physiology. The humans, though tired of being poked and scanned, remained good-natured about the whole experience. Professor Kim finally called a halt to the testing around midnight, allowing the exhausted humans to return to their dormitories. As they left, he was already compiling the day's findings into what would surely become a groundbreaking paper on interspecies biochemical variations. Tomorrow, he told his colleagues as they reluctantly powered down their equipment, we should investigate their relationship with another substance on our toxic list, capsaicin in higher concentrations. Sung mentioned something called ghost peppers that sounds particularly promising. As the scientists discussed the next day's research plans, none of them noticed Min and Sue exchanging amused glances. They hadn't even mentioned alcohol tolerance yet, or the fact that humans regularly consumed diluted acid, vinegar, on their food. The scientific investigation was just beginning, and Earth's seemingly fragile humans had suddenly become the most fascinating species at Galactic University. The bright morning sunlight streamed through the windows of the university's largest event hall, which had been transformed overnight from an ordinary space into something extraordinary. Colorful banners hung from the ceiling, each representing different Earth cultures and cuisines. Tables lined the walls, laden with displays of human food, art, music, and traditions. At the center of it all stood Min, arranging the final items on her display table. Is everything ready? Professor Kim asked, hurrying over with a clipboard. His blue skin was flushed with excitement, making him appear almost purple in the bright lights. Almost, Min replied, carefully placing a small dish of kimchi beside plates of chocolate, coffee beans, and a collection of hot sauces ranging from mild to approach with caution. Each item had been carefully selected from the deadly substances list that had caused such an uproar in the cafeteria just days ago. The scientific investigation had blossomed into something much bigger. What had started as a medical curiosity had captured the imagination of the entire university. Once the initial panic subsided, alien students and faculty had become fascinated by humans' unique biology. Questions poured in faster than they could be answered, and Professor Kim had proposed a cultural exchange event to satisfy the growing curiosity. The turnout is going to be massive, Han said, joining them at the table. I just saw the line forming outside. There must be at least 300 students waiting already. Sue laughed. 300 aliens waiting to watch us eat poison. What could possibly go wrong? The doors opened precisely at noon. Alien students of every imaginable form poured in, some floating, others crawling, many walking on various numbers of limbs. Most approached the human displays with visible caution, keeping a respectful distance from the dangerous substances on display. Min stepped forward, addressing the gathered crowd. Welcome to Earth Cultural Day. Today we'll be sharing some of our favorite foods and traditions with you. Yes, many of these items contain substances from Professor Kim's toxic list, but I promise we won't ask any of you to try them. This announcement was met with a wave of relieved clicks, buzzes, and murmurs from the crowd. First, let's talk about something called spice, Min continued, picking up a jar of red powder. Many Earth cultures use capsaicin, a plant-derived irritant, to add heat and flavor to our foods. But why? Called out a gelatinous being from the back. Why cause pain while eating? That's an excellent question, Sue replied. The sensation isn't exactly pain for us, it's more like intensity. The burn activates pleasure receptors in our brains. June, who had become something of a friend to the humans since the cafeteria incident, raised one of his 4 appendages. Like how some species enjoy the rush of jumping from heights for entertainment. Exactly, Min nodded enthusiastically. It's a controlled, enjoyable intensity. At another table, Sung had set up a coffee tasting station. He was carefully brewing different varieties while explaining the process to a fascinated group of silicon-based beings. Humans often consume caffeine first thing in the morning, he explained. It helps us wake up and feel more alert. You require neural toxins just to function in the morning? Asked Park, the iridescent alien whose skin was currently a curious shade of teal that indicated deep interest. Not exactly require, Sung clarified. But many of us develop a habit. Some humans get headaches if they suddenly stop consuming caffeine. Addiction to toxins, Park murmured, his skin rippling with patterns of astonishment. Fascinating. Across the hall, Han was conducting a chocolate appreciation session. He broke off small pieces of different varieties, explaining the differences between milk, dark, and white chocolate. The aliens watched in amazement as he popped pieces into his mouth without hesitation. The theobromine in chocolate is what makes it dangerous to most species, Han explained. But for humans, it creates a mild mood-enhancing effect. We often gift chocolate to show affection. You show love by gifting poison? Asked Do, a multi-eyed being who had brought along recording equipment to document the event. When you put it like that, it does sound strange, Han admitted with a laugh. But yes, chocolate is associated with romance in many human cultures. This revelation caused a ripple of surprised reactions through the aliens. Some appeared disturbed, others intrigued, but all were utterly fascinated. As the day progressed, the initial wariness began to fade. Aliens crowded around the displays asking increasingly specific questions about human customs and biology. Several brave souls even requested to smell the coffee or chocolate, though none were willing to touch the substances directly. The most popular display turned out to be Sue's demonstration of Korean fermentation techniques. Aliens crowded 5 deep around her table as she explained how humans intentionally allowed microorganisms to transform their food. You deliberately cultivate bacteria on your nutrients? A plant-based being asked, its leafy appendages quivering with what seemed to be horror. Exactly, Sue replied cheerfully. Fermentation produces some of our most beloved foods: kimchi, cheese, yogurt, sauerkraut, pickles. And this doesn't cause illness, the plant being pressed? Only if done incorrectly, Sue explained. When done properly, fermentation actually makes many foods safer and more nutritious for us. Professor Kim appeared at her side, adding his expertise. The human digestive system has co-evolved with certain bacterial species. They actually host trillions of microorganisms in their digestive tracts that help. This information caused several aliens to back away slightly. In another corner, Hyun, a reptilian student known for their artistic abilities, had set up an impromptu portrait station. I want to capture the strange contradictions of human biology, they explained as they sketched Min enjoying a cup of coffee. A species that evolved to consume poisons for pleasure is truly remarkable. As afternoon turned to evening, Professor Kim called for everyone's attention. As a grand finale to our cultural exchange, our human friends have prepared a special demonstration. The 4 humans gathered at the center table, which now held small plates of various foods: kimchi, dark chocolate, coffee, a slice of lemon, and a bottle of beer. We've combined several deadly substances into a tasting menu, Han announced. Nothing extreme, just a sampling of everyday human consumption habits. A hush fell over the crowd as the humans began to eat. Some aliens turned away, unable to watch. Others leaned in, mesmerized by the spectacle. When Sung took a bite of the spiciest kimchi and followed it with a swig of beer, A collective gasp rippled through the audience. The capsaicin and ethanol together would kill most of us instantly, whispered June to a group of first-year students. Min noticed the growing tension and smiled reassuringly. I know this seems strange to all of you, but this is truly normal for us, just as your biology allows you to do things that would be impossible for humans. This seemed to strike a chord with the aliens. A serpentine being with luminescent scales slithered forward. Humans cannot survive in methane atmospheres as my species can, they offered. And we can regenerate limbs, added a crustacean-like alien, snapping one of their many claws for emphasis. Exactly. Sue nodded enthusiastically. We're just built differently. Your poisons are our pleasures and probably vice versa. As the event wound down and aliens began to disperse, many lingered to continue conversations with the humans. What had begun as scientific curiosity had evolved into genuine cultural exchange. Professor Kim approached the humans as they cleaned up their displays. This has been remarkably successful, he said, his four eyes blinking rapidly, and what they'd learned was an expression of happiness. The university administration is interested in making this a regular event, perhaps even expanding it to include other aspects of human culture. Like what? Han asked. Music, art, literature, the professor suggested. Though I must admit I'm personally curious about human medicine. The way you intentionally introduce weakened pathogens into your bodies to build immunity. Fascinating. Min laughed. You mean vaccines? You're right, that would probably seem just as strange as eating spicy food. As they packed up the last of the displays, Hyun approached with their completed portrait of Min. It showed her drinking coffee, but with a soft glow emanating from her throat and stomach, representing the chemical reactions taking place within. I've titled it, The Poison Drinker, Hyun said proudly. It will be displayed in the university gallery if you approve. Min examined the artwork, touched by the care and detail. It's beautiful, thank you. Though maybe we should call it the toxin tolerator instead? Hyun considered this, then nodded, making the adjustment on the title card. As they left the hall that evening, the humans found themselves surrounded by alien students eager to continue the conversation. What had begun as fear and confusion in the cafeteria had transformed into fascination and respect. Their biological quirk, the ability to consume substances lethal to other species, had become a bridge rather than a barrier. Same time next week? June asked, falling into step beside them. I've been researching human music, and I have many questions about why you create sounds that cause temporary hearing damage. Sung laughed. You mean concerts? Oh, you have no idea what you're in for. The cultural exchange had only just begun, and already both humans and aliens were finding that their differences were precisely what made the interaction so valuable. In a universe of diverse biology, perhaps understanding began with accepting that one species' poison could be another's pleasure. The news spread faster than light through the vast communication networks of the Galactic Federation. Ships passing. Each other in deep space exchanged updates. Trading posts buzzed with the latest reports. Alien diplomats held emergency meetings. The story was always the same. A small, unassuming species from a backwater planet called Earth had upended galactic understanding of biology. Humans didn't just survive exposure to universal toxins. They consumed them for pleasure. Admiral Park paced the polished floor of the Federation Security Council chamber, his scaled tail twitching with agitation. The massive view screen behind him displayed images of humans casually drinking coffee, eating chocolate, and adding hot sauce to their meals. This changes everything about our tactical assessments, he growled to the assembled representatives of 17 major galactic powers. A species immune to our standard chemical deterrents poses unprecedented security concerns. The Security Council had convened this emergency session after reports from Galactic University reached Federation headquarters. What had begun as an amusing anecdote about strange human biology had quickly evolved into something more significant when military analysts realized the implications. Are we certain this isn't some elaborate deception? Asked Counselor Jin, her gas cloud form swirling. With patterns of skepticism, Perhaps they've developed specific antidotes or protective measures. Professor Kim, who had been invited to present his findings, shook his head. Our medical scans are conclusive. Their ability to process these toxins is built into their basic physiology. They evolved on a planet filled with organisms that produce these compounds as natural defenses. Instead of avoiding these plants, humans adapted to tolerate them. And now they're joining the galactic community, Admiral Park said grimly. With biology we don't fully understand. Across the Federation capital, in a very different meeting, Ambassador Lee was making a more optimistic. This unique human adaptation presents extraordinary opportunities, she explained, her forearms gesturing enthusiastically. Their biochemistry makes them ideal partners for handling substances toxic to most Federation species. The Trade Commissioner, a crystalline being who communicated through light pulses, brightened thoughtfully. You suggest using humans for hazardous material management? Among other applications, Ambassador Lee confirmed. Their mining colonies could extract resources from environments lethal to our workers. Their food production facilities could safely process ingredients we find dangerous to handle. And their medical researchers might develop treatments using compounds we can't safely study. Back at Galactic University, blissfully unaware of the high-level discussions their biology had sparked, the human students were enjoying their sudden popularity. What had begun as fear had transformed into fascination. Alien students who had once kept their distance now approached with curious questions. Is it true humans deliberately seek out pain during leisure activities? Asked Bin, who had become a regular at their lunch table. Sometimes, Sung admitted, thinking of spicy food competitions and extreme sports. But we'd call it intensity, rather than pain. There's a difference between harmful pain and the kind of challenge that makes you feel alive. This philosophy seemed to perplex many aliens, who had evolved to avoid discomfort at all costs. The concept of voluntarily seeking out difficulty was as alien to them as their multi-limbed bodies were to humans. Professor Kim had updated his teaching materials across all departments. The xenobiology textbook now featured a special section on human adaptations, complete with warnings about assumptions based on universal biological standards. The Cultural Studies Department had added courses on human risk assessment and pleasure-seeking behaviors. Even the Psychology Department was reconsidering cross-species definitions of harm and benefit. The humans have forced us to reconsider fundamental principles, Professor Kim told his colleagues during a faculty meeting. What we thought were universal biological constants are actually just common adaptations among the species we've encountered so far. Meanwhile, at the Federation Ministry of First Contact, officials were frantically revising protocols for future encounters with unknown species. The human case had exposed dangerous assumptions in their procedures. We nearly caused an interstellar incident, Minister Doe admitted to her staff. Our welcome package included samples of substances we considered universally safe. If another species shares human adaptations but in different areas, we could have poisoned them. The ripple effects continued to spread. Commercial enterprises quickly recognized opportunity in this biological quirk. Within weeks, human consultants were being recruited by companies dealing in hazardous materials. Job postings specifically seeking Earth natives with natural toxin tolerance began appearing throughout the Federation employment networks. Entertainment producers weren't far behind. A popular streaming service announced a new reality program called Will It Kill Them, featuring alien contestants guessing which Earth foods humans could safely consume. The first episode, focusing on chocolate, broke viewing records across 12 star systems. Not all reactions were positive. Religious leaders from several species held somber services, discussing the theological implications of beings who thrived on poison. Some fringe groups declared humans evolutionarily unnatural and called for quarantine measures. Fortunately, these voices remained in the minority. On Earth itself, news of their special status in the galactic community was met with mixed reactions. Some people embraced their biological uniqueness, proudly consuming spicy foods and caffeine in public to demonstrate their human powers. Others worried about being viewed as freaks or being exploited for their unusual capabilities. Back at Galactic University, Gil approached the human table during lunch period, watching in fascination as Jin sipped his coffee. "I have a question," Gil said hesitantly, his crystalline form glittering with curiosity. "If your species can tolerate all these toxins, do other Earth species share this adaptation?" Jin laughed. "Actually, chocolate is deadly to our dogs," he explained. "We keep it away from our pets because what's harmless to us can kill them." The tough-eared aliens stared in bewilderment. The revelation that humans shared their planet with companions who couldn't share their poison immunity seemed to confuse them even more than the immunity itself. "So you protect other species from substances you consume for pleasure?" asked June, trying to understand. "Of course," said Min. "Just because we can handle something doesn't mean everything around us can. We're responsible for those more vulnerable than ourselves." The aliens exchanged glances, and Professor Kim, who had been listening nearby, made a note in his datapad. This unexpected display of empathy and responsibility added yet another layer to the complex picture of humanity that was emerging. As the academic year progressed, humans went from being curiosities to valued members of the university community. Their unique biology had opened the door, but their adaptability, creativity, and complex ethical systems kept it open. Admiral Park still viewed them with caution. Ambassador Lee still saw economic opportunity. But across the Galactic Federation, one thing was becoming clear. Humans, with their strange habits of consuming toxins and seeking out challenge, were perhaps the most perplexing species yet encountered in the vast cosmos. And in a universe where understanding other life forms was the highest goal of science, nothing was